Paul, could you offer a prayer for us?
Certainly. And Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to Thee for the opportunity we have to meet together as a group to discuss this case, and we pray for Thy Spirit to be with us, to quicken our minds, help us to remember what we've read and to express our feelings, that we'll be able to listen and understand and communicate well. Help us that we'll be able to have a good experience this morning. And these things we do humbly pray in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So it actually provides a quick synopsis of the case for us. So I'll read that and then we can get into the discussion. So the case describes the dilemma of a marketing manager, Thomas Green, who after being rapidly promoted to a new position is harshly criticized by his boss. Green and his boss disagree on work styles and market projections. Green believes the sales goals set by his boss are based on creative accounting and grossly overstated the current market environment. A mood of silence conflict develops quickly between Green and his boss, and Green is concerned that his boss is building a case to fire him. Green's situation is one in which his failure to adapt his work style and fully understand the demands and boundaries of his new position may lead to his discharge. So the first analysis question, and I'll ask you, Alexis, what do you see as the key issues in this case?
So for me, my thoughts for the key issues were a couple for what was his name? Green? Thomas Green?
Yeah.
He well, because we talked about this our very first week about office politics, and I was having a hard time wrapping my mind around it. I think I'm starting to get a little better idea, but I don't know why my head just won't comprehend it. But I feel like it would have. Okay, ask me the question one more time. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, what do you see as the key issues in this case?
Okay. Frank Davis definitely is kind of an issue because he wants it done a very specific way and of how things should happen in his designs, and then Frank is going against him, but he's going against him in a way that's kind of behind his back, and so that's kind of pissing Frank off, and he's not doing what Frank wants every time he asks for analysis. So an issue is that Frank, or it makes it look like that Thomas is inadequate to do his job, is that he's not doing it right, because when they ask for charts, he doesn't give them charts. And same with data. And another issue is with, I kind of mentioned this in my paper, but how since Frank is kind of building up a case against him, he doesn't really have support by Shannon McDonald, because he didn't really get to know her better after he got to work. He was so focused on trying to okay, because she told him something like, please me or don't mess up. I don't even remember what she said, something along those lines. And so he was so focused on the job that he's ignoring his superiorities, I think is the word, but
Right, a supervisor.
Yeah. And so, because whenever I always find when you work somewhere, especially you start off, I find it very beneficial to get on your boss's good side. So it's kind of like if you're in school, if you're the teacher's pet, it's helpful sometimes. And especially if situations come up. So I think those are a couple of issues that I can think of right off the bat.
Okay. Jill or Paul, do you guys have anything to add on that? What you saw as the key issues?
Well, one thing that Alexis just said about getting on his good side. I don't think that Thomas would ever get on Frank Davis's good side, because Davis had someone else in mind for the job.
Yeah.
And McDonald just kind of, hired him. And so I honestly think that in some ways, Davis already has issues with Green. So he's going to really nitpick, I guess is the word, at everything that Green does. Granted, Green did not help matters when he called out Davis in their meeting over the budget. And to me, right there was maybe you should have waited or did it privately.
Yeah, it's kind of tactless.
Yeah.
Yep. How about you, Paul?
Well, my thoughts go along with what's been said already. I think, and maybe I'm borderlining onto the next question, but I think that Shannon McDonald should not have hired him. I sometimes have a hard time really comprehending as I'm reading, and I'll have to reread and reread and reread, and it takes me forever to get through readings. So I actually have my wife read the stuff to me, so I can comprehend it better. And when she was reading this case, it was, I can't remember what the wording was, but something about the Thomas Green and Shannon McDonald kind of hitting it off. And she was like, oh, maybe there's something else going on here. And it was just kind of like, well, and it kind of tinged my thinking, but I thought, well, maybe there was something going on between those two. I mean, how else would he get that promotion so quickly? So I don't know. It was just kind of weird, but I think that maybe she did a major misstep by hiring him because he has not been with the company very long. He comes from a different kind of a background, and she didn't bring Frank Davis into the hiring process at all. She just hired him, and I think that, if nothing else, was probably the biggest mistake because Frank didn't have any input. You know, if he would have gone in on an interview with him, he would have pointed out, well, he doesn't have this or whatever it is. So I think that was a big mistake.
Yep. So my write-up on this for the key issue was right in line with what Paul and Jill have both said. I think that the issue has been Shannon McDonald in the situation. I don't think much blame really falls on Thomas Green, but he might end up being a casualty of it. Frank Davis probably should have gone out of his way to give the guy a chance, even though it wasn't his hire. But in the end, Shannon McDonald should have consulted with the direct supervisor on who he wants on his team. You see that a lot in the sports world. A coach or general manager is brought in, and they are told to build their team, and then their success is whether or not that team succeeds. And if the team fails, that person's opting out of a job. And so if you're going to put Frank Davis in charge of a team, he needs to have the right to decide who is going to be on his team.
I'm not going to lie, I didn't even think of it that way. My mind did not go there, but it makes a lot of sense now that you guys say it.
So our next question is, if you were Shannon McDonald, and we have hit on this a lot already, would you have hired Thomas Green? Why not that quickly, since we've kind of gone over? But Jill, what do you think?
Would I have hired him?
Yeah, would you have hired Thomas Green? Why or why not?
No, I mean, for instance, I've been where I've been to interviews. My job now. I interviewed with one person. Then the next thing, I get a call back. I interview with 4 people. And and then you wait and you hear back, and then it's down to 2 candidates, and then you go back and you interview with the main person again. So I think in some ways, like Paul hit on, she didn't do it right. She should have called Frank in. They all should have met together. I think she just saw Thomas as a rising star. He was killing it in his position at the time. But, what qualifications did he really have, like you guys said, for this new position? She really didn't go searching for that. There might be something, they're friends or whatever. But no, I don't know that I would have hired him until I took the proper steps and involved more than just, because really, tell you the truth, she's on the line now too.
Yep. That's kind of my thought is I would have had no problem with Frank Davis making the same hire because he's the one that is sticking his neck out there, putting it on the line. But Shannon McDonald shouldn't be making a hire of a person who doesn't have the credentials.
Correct.
If someone wants to hire someone and take a shot at them, it needs to be the direct supervisor. How about you, Alexis? What did you think?
I'm not really sure because it's like I'm twisted because like a part of me I can understand her hiring him because like I said I didn't really think the way you guys did, but the more you guys speak it also makes sense. Like the other point of view, I keep thinking of the first case study that we read, and with I can't remember his name, but how his dad gave him the company and how everyone was really mad because he changed things and he's like young and ambitious in it, but it really helped the company. And I'm not sure how the people that, or the guy that Frank Davis wanted to hire, like what his background was. I agree that Shannon stepped over a line by not including Frank, since Frank would be directly working with him. But I'm not decided yet if it was a mistake to hire Green because everyone can change and improve in all positions that we get. We all have to learn. No one jumps into it perfect. So.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you that there wasn't a problem with hiring Green. Like it's not that Green was completely unqualified. The problem falls in that you didn't have the buy-in from his supervisor.
Yeah, Frank should have been a part of that. I agree with that since he's the one working directly with him.
Yeah. Paul, could you describe Frank Davis? Like what does he value and what is his end goal after this?
Yeah, because he was in the position that Thomas Green is now in, he knows exactly what needs to be done. And he had been in that position for a while, so he knew the job, he knew the clients, he knew what the products were that the company was offering, and based on that, he had made some challenging forecasts. And maybe it was his habit to try to really stretch himself, because one of the big things that Thomas Green kept saying was that, these are blown out of proportion. Well, maybe if he looked at the prior sales forecasts and what actually happened, he might have seen that maybe they weren't quite so blown out of proportion. So, and obviously those forecasts were done before Green came on board. So, and then the big thing is that there are certain ways that you go about doing that job, and Tom wasn't doing that. So, I think I would almost feel the same way if I were in a similar position. If someone was hired to take my place and I knew what I did in that job and someone else is not living up to those expectations, I would be kind of critical of that as well. So I think that that Frank Davis is not completely out of line with what his expectations are. He might have been, gone about it a little bit differently, but I also have to give him credit for, being proactive and pointing these things out. He had that one meeting and talked over the issues and try to find out, where does Thomas Green stand with what these things are. And Thomas Green just has a totally different work method, the way he does it. He'd rather meet with people and speak face to face rather than send them charts. But what he's not understanding is the charts are what can be shared with the client's personnel and management to show what the possibilities are. You can't do that. You can't go and meet with every client and their bosses and their teams to get to know them and try to sell them on something. So yeah, he has a totally different approach that maybe does not fit in this particular position.
Yeah, thanks. Jill, could you describe Thomas Green and what he values and what his end goal is?
Oh, I think he values his customers. I think his end goal is possibly he wants to keep his job, but he needs to learn to adapt. He needs to learn to, this is what the boss wants, then let's do it. Let's get with the boss. Let's decide how you want that done. The one thing I did notice is he was not a very good communicator. He did not communicate well with his boss. And, you know, I've had bosses like that before too, where they've asked you to do certain things and you think, oh, I can do it this way. Well, they've come back and said, I think I asked you to do it this way. And then you just say, oh, okay. You know, maybe your idea was good. Maybe it would help the company in a different way, but that's not the way the boss wants it. So he didn't communicate well, but I think his ultimate goal, his one thing was he was good with his customers. And I think he does want to keep his job, but he's going to have to make some adjustments to keep that job.
Yeah. Were there any disagreements from anybody on how either Frank or Thomas were explained?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Does anybody have any disagreements on how either Paul described Frank or how Jill described Thomas?
No.
Okay. So
I think that oh my goodness, I'm getting names mixed up here. Green. I think Green not only wanted to keep his job, but he also did want to perform well. I mean, he was thinking about other ways of getting clients satisfied, because he was working on some new ideas for, and I can't remember what exactly it is, but he was working on some new ideas for things. But it's like, wait a minute, maybe that might help in the long run, but it's not helping us in the short term. So I think, you know, he really did not only wanted to keep his job, but he wanted to succeed and have the company sell and get more clients, because he was trying to adapt to the shifting preferences of the client's customers. But it may not have been the best time to be doing that, being so new in his position. I think if he would have been able to prove himself and show what he could do with what he was given, and then branch out to these other things that he wanted to do, and get Frank Davis in on that idea. Present them and say, hey, you know, I've been tossing around this idea that maybe we ought to pursue this avenue or whatever, rather than just doing it without Frank's knowledge. Because it seems like, I don't know, it's almost like Green was almost too anxious to do well and too anxious to get the company to do better, but going about it the wrong way.
Yep. I agree with that. So how do the actions of Thomas Green differ from the expectations of Frank Davis? Alexis, what do you think?
Well, they kind of touched on it. Thomas is like, Frank's expectation was more visual. He wanted more. He was asking for more visual stuff, and Thomas's what's the word you use?
So how did they differ from Frank's expectations, his action?
Okay, yeah. And Thomas's is more communication-wise. And I don't remember if it was Paul or Jill, but they touched on it, of how communication can basically only get you so far, and charts are important. And so Frank's expectation was, he kind of wanted Thomas, I don't know, in my mind, to be like a dog, and have him follow him around everywhere and do everything he says. Like, I want you to do this and this, and expect it done immediately. And I want you to do that and that, and have it done immediately. In my mind, at least, Frank wanted like a puppy to do everything he says. And then, but Green wanted to not be that dog. He wanted to be more like a cat. Very sassy and independent, and does what he wants. So that's the best way, I think, of it.
I love that. And I definitely agree with the direction on that you're going. I really don't think Thomas Green has a lot of the blame to go on this situation. He was put into a tough spot. Frank Davis, I kind of wonder, would he actually is this how he always is? Or is he actually looking at the end game of, I want Joe over here to fill this position, so I need to find a way to get rid of Thomas?
And then is he going to treat Joe the way he treats Thomas? And does he know that Joe will be a huge brown noser and just do what he says? So,
right. He could be completely different with the person he had in mind.
Yeah.
The person he had in mind, he might be like, you go do your thing. You let me see what the results are. But when somebody was brought to him by McDonald and she said, hey, this is who I'm giving you. And he's like, wait a minute, I have someone else in mind.
Yeah, he's retaliating. He's like, I don't think so.
Right. So I'll kind of leave the next question open-ended because we've touched a lot on it already. But who is mostly at fault for the state of the current situation?
I think all three of them are at fault for different aspects of situations. They've all got issues.
Paul, who do you think's mostly at fault?
Yeah, if I have to say mostly at fault, I would say it was Shannon McDonald, because she did not use the proper hiring process. I think.
Yeah, Jill.
I agree.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. What actions would you take if you were Thomas Green? Jill, you want to answer that one?
Well, if I was Thomas Green and this situation came up, I would definitely, first off, ask to meet with both of them. Not just with Shannon, not with, both of them. And find out, well, the first thing is, what's my job description? We all have somewhat of a job description. Was he given a job description? Was he given what they expected of him? Did they sit down and go over the job with him? So I think definitely they need to give him a job description, what they expect from him, what his target marks are. And I think he needs to meet with it has to be all three of them together.
Yeah, and that's actually the advice I wrote in my paper to Shannon McDonald, is that she should want to meet with both of them as well. So I'd say that probably applies no matter who we're giving that advice to.
Right. Agree.
Paul, you want to start us off on the next section? It says, how does power and office politics come into play?
All right. Well, I didn't know that I really got out of this case that there was a whole lot of power and office politics going on. Maybe I was just not quite seeing it. But as I mentioned earlier, the way that my life read this, it seemed like Green and McDonald they hit it off. I was bringing that up on my screen here in the case itself. That they met at this week-long thing, and they hit it off well because they went to the same school. They were both from Georgia, and even when she went to hire him, she says, "I know your qualifications don't quite meet, but I'm taking a chance on you." And so I think she admitted to herself that she was maybe not making the right step. But, it was part of they were becoming chummy. And so I thought it was maybe not necessarily so much politics, but just some of the things that happen between co-workers sometimes happens. And maybe there was a little bit of favoritism going on there because they hit it off so well. And maybe that is office politics. I don't know. Like you said earlier about becoming the teacher's pet, Alexis. Anyway, I wonder if that might be part of it. And then maybe with Frank Davis, he kind of was grooming someone to take that position, and it didn't happen. So he was kind of he was not happy. He was retaliating. Maybe that does come into play a bit with politics.
Yeah, I think for my answer on that question takes a little bit of an assumption, but I'm going to assume that Shannon McDonald hiring somebody directly for Frank Davis probably means that those two didn't have the best relationship to start with. So
Good point.
Would she have gone to another one of the supervisors and done the same thing? Or was she in a way saying, here, I'll show Frank who's in charge. I'm his boss. I can hire whoever I want. And then went to Frank and said, hey, guess what, Frank? I got a new person for you.
No,
So
I hadn't thought of that.
I didn't think of that either. That's a good point, Jeff.
Yeah.
It really is.
So moving forward, Alexis, what are each of their, man, that's a weird question. I'll leave this to everybody because I'm not even sure what it means. What are each of their conflict styles?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah. I'm glad it's open.
Yeah.
And they're giving us lots of hints there, but I'm not sure.
Did I miss a reading earlier in the semester? Were there conflict styles? I have bad reading comprehension as well, so
Wait,
I read.
do you think it's how do they resolve conflict? Because if so, John Green doesn't. It seemed that during when he with his issues, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to avoid Davis the most I can, not see him."
Yeah, so passive, really.
Yeah, so he goes. He avoids it. I think Frank Davis. He did kind of confront him at first, but then he's also kind of working around Thomas to get to Shannon and be like, "Look what he's doing," and stuff. So he kind of works around, and Shannon. I don't know. She kind of started the conflict, so I don't even know for her.
Just going off of the discussion of the prompts there, compromise, that obviously would be Shannon, that she compromised by hiring this guy that she had a connection with and thought, she was chummy with, even though she knew he didn't quite have all the qualifications or experience. She hired him anyway, and she was taking a chance on him. So that was her, making a compromise to what she probably should have done.
Yeah. So what should he do now? I'm guessing it's still referring to Thomas Green.
We kind of touched on that of how he should meet definitely with the other two and talk with them face to face. I also mentioned that in my paper, but I mentioned it as a strength and benefit for him since he is a people's person and it seems to be with his clients is what I assume, that he's kind of good at persuading people. So if he really wants to David's job, he needs to not only persuade them that he can change and get better and improve, but lay out a plan with them of how he should improve and what they want to see out of him and what they want him to do to help better the company. And so then if he works like a dog, sorry, I'm laughing because I just referenced him not too long ago to a cat. And if he works really hard for a couple years and proves that he can be valuable to the company and to Frank, then he'll be able to better, I think, be able to suggest to Frank his thoughts and opinions and how, give his advice of how things might run smoothly. And if Thomas honestly believes that Frank's projections are totally off, he needs to back up his why he thinks they're off. He needs to come up with some charts of data that would help to visually show, see, this is why I think you're off. But he doesn't. He just claims, you're not right, Frank. That's it. And it's sometimes we need more than just word. We need visual proof.
Yeah.
I'm getting sidetracked. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I look at, it said, what can he do to salvage the situation? I'll turn back to what could Shannon McDonald do to salvage the situation? Because I think she's the one that actually has the keys to do it at this point. I think, if I remember right, it said that other managers who were in Frank's same position were actually pretty pleased with the way Thomas Green worked. And so I would recommend at this point maybe approaching them, Shannon Davis, and seeing if any of them would be willing to take Thomas Green on their team.
Oh, I didn't think of that either.
But besides that, I don't know if there's much Thomas Green can do to salvage the situation. I think Frank Davis could give him a chance.
Yeah.
But
well, and I think Shannon needs to, she's got to save face also. Yeah, this is the one I recommended. This is the one that I felt was good for the position. So I like your idea, Jeff, about going to the other managers and seeing if they'd be, hopefully Frank Davis hasn't badmouthed Thomas to all the managers also. Hopefully he hasn't gone out and spread, conflict with the other manager.
If I read it right, Thomas has done that to the other managers to Frank.
Yes, I think you're right. And that's where you
agree with Thomas.
Got to keep things to yourself.
Yeah. So, Paul, what can he do to repair the relationship with Davis at this point?
Do what Davis wants. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, he's met with him once already. He's got another email, as a follow-up, about things he needs to be doing, and he's not doing them. I mean, he just plainly is not making a change. Now, I know it's hard for people to change. It's hard for people to do things differently. But, if I'm going into a new position, I'm, the thing I thought of, when he points out, the other, the West Coast person, his counterpart, has got all these, sales and charts and things like that. I'm not going, hey, I want to meet with that person and see what they're doing so I can do the same thing. I mean, that's what I would do if I was trying to fit in and save my job. I want to be able to know what others are doing in my same position to see what is expected of me so I can do the same thing. And then, update the calendar. Let him know what's going on. Do those projections. If he doesn't know how to use PowerPoint or whatever, ask someone in the office that can show him, or take a class or something like that. I don't know. It just seems like, if he really, really wants to keep that job, at one point he said it was his dream position, then I definitely would be doing something like that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. You're absolutely right, because if he were to go and do everything that Davis was asking him to do, and then that didn't resolve the conflict, he could document all that.
Right.
And he could use that as proof to Shannon McDonald of, look, I'm not the problem here. Here's what he told me I needed to do. Here's what I did, and he still has issues.
Right.
And so that would be the best way to handle the situation. Just go do what he tells you to do and see if that resolves it. And if not, then figure out what to do from there. So, Jill, if we move on to the application, how can managing up be applied at work?
Well, the big thing is communication. I mean, what we've learned here is the top thing is communication, and it has to start from the top. It has to start with Shannon, and then she needed to communicate her ideas to Frank. And then Frank would have been able to communicate his thoughts, and it's all communication. Same with Thomas. Thomas needed to communicate with Frank what he's doing, what his schedule is. It's the same for all of us. We need to communicate with our bosses on a daily basis. It's just not a one-time thing. I mean, my boss comes out to my desk 2 or 3 times a day. How's things going? Do you need anything from me? What about this? This assignment. And it's, why are we so afraid to communicate sometimes is my big question. And that's the big thing we need to do, even in our own jobs, in our daily lives.
I think sometimes it might be fearful to communicate because some people aren't receptive and they don't actually listen. So you're like, what's the point? They're not going to listen. They're not going to receive this. It's like, I'm at a loss here. I can't do anything. So at least that's my fear.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And sorry, I'm not crying. My eyes are weeping really bad and steaming, if you can see it. So I'm not crying on you guys.
Good old allergies.
Yeah.
Okay. Alexis, I'll ask you the next question. What are the principles of power within an organizational structure?
The principles of power. Are we talking about like abusing the power or using the power for good?
And I take it, I'm looking at this organization, like, how should it be used? Like, what would be the way that you would feel that it should be used from Frank Davis or Shannon McDonald's situation, because they're the ones that are in the positions of power?
So my mind just keeps thinking of what Jill is talking about with listening and communication. And I think with power, sometimes people let it go to their head, but it shouldn't be used like, how do I say this? You should definitely involve people, like how we've been talking about that Frank needed to be involved in the process of hiring Thomas Green, but Shannon used her power to go over Frank because she could. She had that power. But she should have used her power to even, because she has the power to even bring Thomas Green as an option to begin with, to Frank Davis to interview with him about it. So she has that certain level of power, but I think she abused it. That's all I can really think of, honestly. I'm sorry. I don't know if that was helpful or if I actually answered the question.
No, that was good.
Those were my thoughts exactly. Was that she kind of messed up the organizational structure, and she exercised her power to hire Green when she probably should have involved Frank Davis in that process. So yeah, that was my thought exactly.
Okay. And I'll kick us off on the next question because I kind of have an example. So how do office politics come into play in many organizations? So like I mentioned last week, I spent 4 years on a school board. And there are a lot of office politics when you're talking a school district that has 17 schools in it, or 18, I guess we had. And you had all the principals, and the principals were hired directly by the superintendent. Yet, with that many of them, not all of them are fully going to get along with the superintendent because there's going to be time that's passed and whatnot. But one thing that I definitely noticed being a school board member is the principals that were comfortable with me, they had no problem coming to me and saying what problems they thought existed and how they didn't think the superintendent was doing good in certain areas and what they wanted changed. But then if I would bring that up and it would become a discussion at a school board meeting, I'd never mention their names, but they'd then be brought in to talk about the problems, and they'd talk exactly like everything was going great and that it didn't need to change at all because their boss was then sitting right there. So kind of spinning off of that, how did office politics come into play in that situation that I just described? Jill, what do you think?
Oh, big time. And I think that's a hard one too, like you just said. You know, they're talking behind each other's backs, but when you come face to face, let's solve the problem. They don't want to be the ones to point fingers. They don't want to be the ones that bring it up in fear of their jobs.
Yeah. And I guess a part I left out I probably should have included is that superintendent was a very vindictive type person. And so if they would have said it in public, they would have been in a lot of trouble. But at the same time, I think they could have come up with ways to state their opinion without directing it right at him rather than just cowering and going back to, oh, no, everything's great.
Yeah, everything's hunky-dory when it really isn't.
Yeah.
And you know, how can an organization work that way? You know, you need to work together as a team.
Right. Let's see. Paul, how can someone be proactive in managing office politics?
I think a lot of it has to be with really establishing the culture of the company and the work environment. I have done some case studies in some of my other classes, and there's some cultures that are very, very open. They're very flexible. They try to create an environment where people just want to succeed. They really want to have things go well. My personal take on good management is a little different from what a lot of managers have, although there's those that share my same philosophy. My philosophy is you make sure your employees are happy, and they'll make sure that the customers are happy and the company succeeds. Too many managers, they want to make sure that the company succeeds, or they want to make sure their customers are happy. They don't care about the employees. And that to me is a big misstep. If, like, for example, at IKEA, there are days that we are just so busy, and sometimes our lunches and breaks will be an hour and a half late. And just a little simple thing like that, when you're standing on your feet, when you're just scanning things constantly all day long, you need to have a break. And when that gets forgotten, it kind of makes you unhappy. It makes you not want to help people out. It makes you, they should be on top of this, And I understand when you have people that call in sick, or maybe things are not quite going right. It's busier than you expect it to be. I can understand those kinds of things. But in my opinion, on days like that, even though we do have to keep the customers happy, you've got to keep your employees happy. And so I think that when you create an environment that understands that, then your employees are much happier, and they're more willing to let some little things slide occasionally, but not if it's constantly. But I don't know if I helped to answer that, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
No, that's good. Jill or Alexis, you guys have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. So connections, Alexis, what gospel connections are pertinent to this?
I have no idea. Let me think about it. If anyone else has something to say, inspire me, then maybe I can think of something.
Well, one thing that would come to my mind is how things operate. We talked about how Shannon McDonald made the hire without consulting Frank Davis. There's a proper line in how things work. Is there ever a time where President Nelson just goes to a stake president and says, hey, here's your bishop?
I don't know. I do remember a story of a stake president knowing that this guy's going to be a bishop. Sorry, I don't know if this has anything to go along with it. It was just a cool story. But the stake president knew this guy was going to be a bishop, but he wasn't active in the church. And so he did not, so that ward didn't have a bishop for a while, because the stake president was like, no, this guy is supposed to be the bishop. Even though he's not currently active in the church yet, he will be your guys' bishop. And I guess they didn't have a bishop for a while, and then eventually he came to the church, and then he was bishop, and he was wonderful. It was like, I just thought that was kind of cool. Sorry, I know it has nothing to do with it. But
that's all right.
Yeah.
I believe one thing is that you have to be true to yourself, and integrity comes into that play. In where I work, of course, you have to have a current temple recommend, or be temple worthy. And there have been times where we've had some drivers that have been kind of on, you need to kind of get this taken care of, because it is part of the job requirement. And I had a call one day looking for a job, and I explained to him, this is the requirements, and he says, well, that's discrimination. Well, it might be discrimination, but that's our job requirements. And so you have to be true to yourself, and you have to be true to your organization. I know in ours, I mean, you have the organization chart, just like they showed us in the case study. and these are the people that are over this person and whatnot. But the other thing is that you have to work together as a team, just like you do as a family. As your family, you have to work together, and it can't just be one person taking care of the laundry and doing this and this. We all have to work together, even in a work place.
Thank you. Are there any connections between this case and this week's reading assignment? Anybody see any direct ones?
No, just kind of what I just said. I was reading, I just replied to your post, Jeff, on your reading.
Yeah.
And how you felt that a lot of it had to do with your situation now with your children, and how you see a lot of that, because you're at that stage of your life with your children in our reading. Yeah. And I kind of replied back to you and said, I'm kind of at the other spectrum. My kids are all gone, and now they're they're out of the house. One's getting married in September. One's a parent already. The other one just living with a bunch of friends or whatever. And it's hard for me as a parent not to still want to do the daily take care of this, or, I don't know how to explain it. How you can't, I don't know. There's days I still wish I had control over them as adults.
Yeah.
Here. I totally agree. Yes.
Because you'd see them out in the real world. And that's what I think Stephen Covey in his reading was kind of talking about too,
Right. It kind of worries me a bit reading it this week, because, it's so easy as a parent right now to think, like, you're 4 years old, you're 6 years old, you do this.
Right.
But what is that doing to my long-term relationship with them? Because the day's going to come where they're going to be older and they're going to remember how I treated them.
And that's what I liked about what you posted. It's true. And in the reading, it's the same thing. But I still have children that call up and ask for dad because something's wrong with someone's car, which we love. We love to be able to help them the way we can. And to me, it's still important for me to have the communication and the relationship with my children, even as adults, as we did when they were younger.
Thanks, everybody, for participating. Is everyone interested in how the case turned out?
Yeah.
Yes.
I hate how there's no ending.
So I'll read it. This is Thomas Green, the rest of the story. After McDonald's February 5th, 2008 email, Green took the offensive against his boss. He crafted a series of memorandums, emails, reports, and projections that exposed inaccuracies and creative forecasting. This data enabled Green to build some alliances with other marketing personnel who used the data to ultimately side with him. On April 4th, it was announced that Frank Davis was being moved laterally to an undefined special project. However, Green's tactics were seen as overly brutal by many in the company, and although he won the battle against his boss, his career was irreparably harmed. McDonald distanced herself from him. By July 2008, Green announced he was resigning from his position to pursue full-time studies for an MBA. We can only speculate that what would have occurred if Green had tried to help Davis work out the discrepancies and problems with forecasts. Perhaps both would have succeeded.
Wow. That's not what I was expecting.
Me neither.
Yeah, me neither. I was kind of expecting what happened to Davis would be what happened to Green, but.
Right.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any last comments?
No,
I don't think so. I thought it was a great case, and I thought this discussion was good, and I appreciate hearing everyone's input on things. Kind of gives you a different perspective from what your limited, one set mind thinking was, and I really appreciate these discussions.
So do we know who has the discussion next week?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to. Oh wait, that's gonna be interesting with Steve not here. Because at first it was like Paul, then Jill, and then Jeff, and then me, and then Steve, and then I'm pretty sure it goes again.
Me.
You, and then Jeff, and then me, and then Paul.
Okay, I will email Sister McHenry, is it? Yeah.
I don't know.
And find out if he's still in the group.
Yeah, because he's supposed to do it after me.
Okay, I'll do that.
And if he's not going to take it, I'll take it.
All right.
Oh, thanks,
Great.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, we can roll from there if we need to redo the schedule. I'm going to be here every week, so.
So am I.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to do the whole air thing, but I'm gonna try and watch the video that Paul sent not too long ago, or instructions. I don't know if it was a video. So if I fail, though, look at your emails because I'll be frantically panicking and be like, guys, I don't know what to do. So
the instructions Jeff and Paul sent me, Alexis, last week were
awesome.
Just
okay. Because I'm not technology savvy, even though it's like my generation of technology. I fell at it, so I'm like,
I'm terrible with technology, but this is one that it looks difficult, and once you figure it out, it becomes pretty simple.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Well, thanks everybody again.
Yes.
I will
have a great Memorial weekend, guys.
Okay, I'm going to post this link, so I'll
awesome.
Sounds good.
Thank you.